Hello, everyone. Welcome back to your favorite weekly podcast hosted by your favorite two peas in a pod environmentalists,
Noah.
Noah and Sydney.
And as always, we have a very special guest with us today.
Me, Eric.
Yeah, this is Eric. He's our environmentalist, ecologist, feminist, and our wind energy specialist for this week.
Now, don't worry, we studied up on our wind energy, so we won't be left in the dust.
Oh, that's a good one, Noah. So let's dive into some research on this topic.
So, Eric, how do wind turbines work? You're our self-proclaimed expert on the topic.
Yeah, of course. So, Noah, in modern wind turbines, wind rotates the rotator blades, which converts kinetic energy into rotational energy. This rotational energy is transferred by a shaft to the generator, which produces electrical energy. It's very similar to like those little windmills that we used when we were kids.
Hey, Jamie, can you pull up a video about wind turbine turning?
The slow rotation speed of the blades is not enough to produce electricity. For this reason, a gearbox is connected between the rotor and the generator. This generator transforms the aerodynamic force into electricity. The housing holding the gearbox and the generator is called the nacelle, which can move according to the direction of the wind. If the direction of the wind changes, a velocity sensor located on the top of the nacelle sends a signal to the yawing mechanism at the base of the nacelle. This mechanism then moves the blades to face the proper wind direction.
That's really interesting. Thank you for the visual. Wind energy seems pretty efficient, but what is the actual net energy efficiency from wind turbines?
For every 1 unit of energy expended, wind energy produces 2.5 units of energy. But wind energy's efficiency varies with speed. That's one of the main issues people actually have with wind energy. It's because it's sometimes not as reliable as other forms of energy. Does that sound like it's on the mark, Eric?
That sounds exactly right.
That's pretty neat, but how much do they cost?
So the cost of a utility scale wind turbine can range from about 1.3 million to 2.2 million. Now, this can depend on how much nameplate capacity is installed, but most of the commercial scale turbines today are installed with 2 MW in size and roughly cost 3 to 4 million. So it's pretty expensive.
And how does this market work? Is it centralized or decentralized?
Well, actually, this market is centralized, which means it's coordinated by a market operator long before delivery. Into how this can actually be stored in a reserve. Eric, do you have something to say about this?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of different ways that they store energy.
If I can take over here real quick, electrical batteries are commonly used in solar energy applications and can be used to store wind-generated power. Today's electrical grid has little storage capacity, so other measures are used to balance electricity supply and demand.
How much land does it actually take to run this?
So one wind turbine can require up to 80 acres of land, and since these turbines tend to be spaced far apart from one another, a lot can be done on that land. It's very common that turbines are on farmland or are in the ocean, so there's seemingly no reason other energy sources can't be used, as long as said energy sources aren't encroaching on the turbine.
And an interesting fact is the space between wind turbines could be used for other purposes like agriculture or grazing. But what other effects do wind turbines have on land, habitat, soil, etc.? How long does the damage last? Because the main issue with a lot of other power sources is emissions, and those are really bad for the environment.
So wind turbines do not release emissions that can pollute the air or water. There are some really rare exceptions, and they do not require water for cooling, unlike nuclear. So they actually don't have very many net damages to the environment.
But just to jump in, there are effects on wildlife. There's potential injury and death of birds and bats from turbine collisions, and the loss and fragmentation of a species habitat.
That sucks. But what about the water?
So there's actually no water impact associated with the operation of wind turbines. As in all manufacturing processes, however, some water is used to manufacture steel and cement for wind turbines, which is unavoidable.
So, Noah, I know that y'all have been doing some research on these wind turbines, and specifically, I was wondering, what do they have like in terms of effect on air quality?
So wind turbines do not release emissions that can pollute the air or water. Wind turbines consume no fuel and emit no air pollution. But Eric, what about the effects on fish and wildlife? I know earlier you were talking about the effect on birds, but are there any other impacts?
So wind turbines can affect wildlife both directly via collisions, like say the bats, or indirectly due to noise pollution, habitat loss, and reduced survival or reproduction. Birds and bats are among the most affected, as we already said before, but construction and operation of wind turbines could impact commercial, recreational, and tribal fishing through displacement of fishermen through traditional fishing areas. This changing the distribution, abundance, and species composition of fish in the area.
That's really sad. What are like the greatest limitations for the wind turbine industry in terms of like producing power, reliability, locations, you know?
So really, it's actually not too bad. It's just that the initial cost of building them is really high, like we talked about before. And it is there's some technological immaturity as we're still kind of figuring out how to best kind of create these. And as we said before, it's not always consistent. Like the wind isn't always going to go, but it's pretty good otherwise. So the US needs to find alternative renewable energy sources, and wind energy is one very promising renewable energy source. And so, in your opinion, how else would the US pursue this energy?
Like you said, the US needs to find alternative renewable energy sources, and wind energy is one very promising renewable energy source. And in addition, wind turbines can be set up nearly anywhere where there is wind. And the US is a huge country, so there's a lot of untapped potential when it comes to that.
Yeah, and then additionally, turbines have very minimal pollution potential, meaning that if we want to go green in the future, wind energy is probably one of our better solutions for this.
Yeah, and the only downsides are the initial costs and aesthetics, which are subjective. And I would say that they actually look quite nice.
Yeah, I quite enjoy the little windmill forests. I think they're very pleasant to look at and they make me feel happy feelings.
Yeah.
So true.
Well, Eric, thank you for being on our show today. We'll see you next time.
Yeah,
All
it's
right,
been a
everyone, thank you
pleasure.
so much for tuning in.